Okay, now on to this morning. Two great speakers to start the fourth day of Photo London. The first is Mark Lubell, Director of the ICP in New York. We had a very good cultivation event, I think they called it, at ICP earlier this year, and we're hoping this will be the start of a growing relationship between our two organizations. Welcome to you, Mark, and welcome to your colleagues from ICP. We're very delighted to have you here. Secondly, and I'm excited to introduce Roger Ballen, whose work I've admired for many years. One of the themes for Photo London has been this year to challenge assumptions about what photography can be. And Roger's work, and I'm sure all of you know it, does just that. So I'm very pleased to welcome Roger here this morning. I'm also looking forward to the extraordinary things that he's going to be doing in Arles later this year. I'm sure he's forbidden from talking about that, but I'm sure there's a lot more things he's going to talk about this morning. So over to the pair of you. Thank you all very much for coming, and I look forward to seeing you later. Bye-bye.
Well, thank you very much. It's great to be here, Michael, and Mark, thank you for entertaining me and coming here to talk with me. It's a great pleasure, and I thank the audience also. Well, we always have to start somewhere, and that's sometimes the most difficult place to be. Where do you start? Well, today, in this lecture, I'm starting with the mind. M-I-N-D. Did you ever think about the mind? What does the mind tell you? Is it really the mind? What does the mind ultimately have to do with your pictures? What does the mind actually have to do with your pictures? Perhaps everything, perhaps nothing. So let's start with something about the mind. See this word here. This is the key word. Begins with an M and ends with a D. It is called mind. How do you get to the mind? Who is the mind? Does the mind trick you? Is the mind somebody else? Those are the key questions that you gotta let haunt you. I came to this place to give a talk. They did not like it. They grabbed me. We walked and walked and walked. I did not know where I was going. There were voices everywhere. People screaming and moaning. This is what I heard.
It's the way out. It's the way out. There is no way out.
Please, no one hear me. I hear the angels. They're talking to me. They're talking to me. Can you hear them? Can you hear them? I want to get out!
Well, that's where it all starts. That's where it all ends. No mind, no pictures, no mind. So let's start. Next picture. The purpose of this talk is to illustrate the development of my style over the last 50 years. I've been doing pictures since I've been a teenager. I'm 67 now, and I keep going. And each picture, each day, brings me closer to what I would refer to as my core mind. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to define my core mind. Next. These are early pictures. And if you're students, I always tell you, the first step is to find the path, to try to find the way in, not the way out, the way in. And once you get in there a bit, you'll find other roads, and the path may go straight, it may turn back on you, but you're on some sort of path. And the only way to find that, is to go out and take pictures. That's really the only way. That's the hard part of this job. It may be the exciting part, but it's the hard part. That's what separates us. That was some of the earlier work. Next. In 1982, I moved to South Africa. I'm originally American. I was born in New York. I did my studies in Berkeley, California, have a PhD in geology. And when I got this PhD in geology, I went to South Africa, because South Africa, in many ways, is the center, or it's the richest place in the world mineralogically, and it was a good place to drill deeper. Next. Up to the time I was here, all my pictures were outside. The sun was very bright. I didn't like hanging around in the car waiting for the sun to get to one side of the horizon or come up on the other side. It was hot and it was boring. So one day, in a place called Hope Town, where they found the Hope Diamond, which is one of the biggest diamonds ever found. There's no hope there right now, by the way. I knocked on the door. Who's that? It's Roger. Who's that? It's Roger. Come in, Mynheer. Thank you. And that was the beginning. That really was the beginning of the Ballen-esque nest. When I went in these places, I found the motifs. I started using a square format camera, a flash, and found some of the people or the archetypes that I would work for the rest of my career. Next. People often say, Mr. Ballen, where did you find these subjects? Are you referring to that, sir? Because that's a subject here. Everything in my picture is the subject. If you take out one part of the body, you probably die. Everything in the picture means something. Everything's organic. Everything works together. That's a big problem in photography, in my personal opinion. And everything I say today is in Roger Ballen's personal opinion. Next. This is a very famous picture. It brings you back to your so-called core mind, to your core genetics, to the other part of the brain. There's always a reason. There's always a reason why pictures like this are remembered. You can never put your finger on it, and you never can come up with an answer. It has to do ultimately with brain cells. How do brain cells work? Don't ask me. Ask my mind. But my mind doesn't give answers. Next. In 1995, I started working only in Johannesburg. And from 1995 to now, 99.999% of all my pictures I take are around, in and around Johannesburg. Let's see a video.
So someone chopped you 36 times. What's your name?
Dirk Petrus Johannes Cornelius.
Why do you carry an axe around with you?
Because it's my weapon.
Yo, welcome to the outlet. I'm Stanley. I'm gonna show you all my children, my baby rats. Here come police! I'm gonna run in front of them. You're gonna lock me up. I'm telling you. Yeah! That was a fun, Roger.
Yeah, hi, Stan. How are you?
Okay, and you, Rog?
Did you have a good day?
Yes. I've been at Ben for some time now.
And what did you do? What did you show him?
I showed him a lot of things in the outline. Ben can't believe his eyes with all these people around here.
That's great. Did you catch any rats today?
A lot. Every day I catch the rats and take them home and let them go.
Oh, that's great.
Were you taking photos today?
I'm in Johannesburg today. I'm taking some pictures of rats myself.
What ones?
White ones, black ones, and gray ones.
Let them see it.
How's Klein Dirty, Stan?
He's all right. He's walking around with the axe, chopping everything up down here.
Really? You watch yourself. Now, you be careful where you're walking. And don't walk around the outland at night.
No.
Take care. Goodbye, and you take care of yourself and make sure Ben drives back carefully.
Bye, George. I love you. Come on!
Jump in.
Yeah! Yeah, you bastard!
Run, dude.
Jump there.
Hi Stan, hoe gaat het?
Alright.
How's it, Turkey?
Hi Ben, nice to see you. How are you?
How's it going?
My name is Dirk. I've got plenty of rooms I'm renting out to the poor people.
How's it, Stephanus? Hi, dude. What you doing?
I'm drawing. Let me tell you about Roger. The first day I met him, it was because of a lady who took me to him. Draw a few pictures, and from that day I started working for him.
Who decides what you draw? Does he tell you what to draw? Or?
No, he doesn't tell me what to draw. I draw by myself. I love to draw. I love nothing else but drawing.
What are you drawing?
Light is dead.
Do you know where Stan is?
This was probably in his room.
Okay, thanks.
I killed once, never again. Never again. I killed once and never again. Every day I catch the rats and take them home and let them go.
Tomorrow, like every other day for the past 20 years, Stan will get up, catch rats, take them home, let them go. So this series was called Outland. And when it came out, people thought it was a treatise on the poor white, but it really wasn't. You know, you can tell something that's contemporary from something that has maybe something that has more depth or longevity to it. If it lasts for a while and you take it from place to place and people started recognizing the pictures, they remember the pictures even though they maybe don't even know where South Africa is on the map, then you know you're maybe saying something. So in this book, this is the 3rd edition here. So now people don't know very much about South Africa. They actually don't care, to be honest. But what is the thing? What are these pictures saying? What are they saying? They say something about human absurdity. They're saying something about the theater of the absurd, which, like it or not, we're all involved in. We're all part of this theater of the absurd, trying to find meaning in a world of meaninglessness. Next. Cat catcher. You see, I'm a formalist. I told you that from the beginning. Everything means something. Everything's there for a reason. The teeth, the teeth. The spots, the spots. The eyes, the eyes. I'm a great believer in the decisive moment, actually, in photography. I still come from that tradition. I'm a black and white photographer in many ways, coming from the street tradition. Even though the work has evolved and evolved and evolved, I still believe that the most important part of the picture comes in the moment. Next. Head below wires. See that form with that form with that form with that form with that form. Boing, 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 boing. Next. Shadow chamber. Beginning in 2000 to 2004, I moved to one particular building. It was an old building they used for the mines, housing miners in the early part of the 19th century. There were little rooms and long hallways, and I called this project shadow chambers for the rooms, the little rooms that existed in this 3-floor house. Next. This was one of the famous pictures taken at the time. People say, do you get to know the subjects? Yeah, maybe. What do they think? I'm not sure. What did they tell you? You mean, what did they tell the camera? I'm sorry, the camera doesn't have ears. Doesn't have ears. Anyway, I took this picture within 5 minutes of meeting this man. Then I went off. It was on one of the buildings on the outskirts of the shadow chamber building. Then when I came back, I asked him where he was. They said, sir, he locked himself in the barn out there. We found him dead. Next. God. What's God spelt backwards? Dog. Clever, huh? I. Form, 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 form. But form's not everything, you see. Form's not everything. See, form's just the beginning, so don't get me wrong about that. There's something called deeper meanings, metaphors, poetry, philosophy, things that art's supposed to be. Hopefully that's what photography is also supposed to be in some way or another. That makes it last. That makes it stay in the mind. Next. Roar. Beginning about this time, pictures started, drawing started to enter the work. So during this time, there was people in pictures, portraiture and pictures. This was sort of an intermediate stage. Next. At the end of it, the portraiture started to disappear about 2003 or 4, replaced by a somewhat surrealistic world. Next. After Shadow Chamber, I found another building. It was like a space like this, but 10 times bigger, where people went in and built little rooms. And I worked in this place for 5 years. It was an old place where the mining companies in Johannesburg, see, Johannesburg was the gold center for most of the gold produced in human history. More than half the gold produced in human history comes from around Johannesburg. So they had these places like this, and this space was used to store mining things, mining explosives and ropes and winches. And when the apartheid government fell, people moved in here and started to live there. Next. Boarding house. You see, the most important thing in the picture is, guess what? The white in the eye. Without the white in the eye, there's no picture here. There's no picture. Ties up with that, ties up with that, ties up with that. Next. Cut loose. Next. I always like to look at this picture because in a way it exemplifies what I'm trying to do in my photography. Strong form, relationship between sculptural aspect, drawing, painting, and ultimately photography. So this is about the moment. And it's simple, it's clear, and it's enigmatic. It's enigmatic. I commonly say, if if I can explain my pictures, it's a bad picture. If you can put the picture into words other than using words like enigmatic, it's a bad picture to me. Now, I told you I'm talking about Roger Ballen here, not about you. So you may have another idea, which is fine, no problem. We all have different minds. Next. Confinement. He tried to steal the person who ran the boarding house's TV. That's actually blood on the floor. Next. I'm a little bit worried about the time. So I have a video called Asylum of the Birds. Maybe then there's another video. I'm not sure whether I should. Let me skip this one and then we'll go to the next video. I'll show the last video because I don't want to only talk up here. So we'll skip the video. Or you can see it on my website. So after this, I worked in a building, and you can see the video, where birds were let loose with other animals, and people stayed in this building. They stayed in this building with the birds and the other animals and other people. And this was, again, about a 5-year project. My projects tend to be about 5 years. You know, it's hard to take good pictures. I try that when I'm home. I travel a bit, but I try to work 4, 5, 6 days a week. But, you know, good pictures are unpredictable. You can't predict it. Sometimes my best pictures are when I physically had a bad cold or didn't feel so well. And some days when I feel great and enthusiastic, it doesn't happen. Is it about the mind? Of course. You can't blame what's out there. That's a bad idea. You can only blame the mind. The mind isn't able to make coherency. That's it. Next. Deathbed. Where do birds come from? Eggs. What does this look like? Egg. It's coming out of the shell. See, these are things that the mind picks up somehow or another. And why pictures like this might work. It's not the only reason it works. One reason. It's layer on layer on layer on layer. You can't get to the bottom of it. The bottom stays mysterious, twists you around, takes you to another place, different than where you thought you would end up. Next. Headless. Okay, next. Memento Mori. This woman was going to another space here, entering another zone. When I was taking the picture of this child here, I guess she could see or feel something. So she went into her room and got that costume and went underneath the bed. It's a good picture, huh? That's a hard job. It took me years and years and years to be able to integrate painting with my photography. In fact, in 1973, when I was in New York City for a few months, I went to the Art Students League. I did painting for about 5 months. And then I didn't do it again for 30 years. I didn't finish what I had to do in 73. Next. This is the last project I'll show you. It's a book that just came out with Ames and Hudson called The Theater of Apparitions. It's very different than the last pictures. All the pictures were taken on window glass. So glass like here with one of these windows, I painted on it using epoxies and paints and everything else and made these photographs. So let me show you, this is an animated video. Then I'll show you a few pictures and then we can enter into discussion. In the end, all that'll be left are bones, my photographs, and perhaps I'll be an apparition. Just by way of an advertisement, at 1 o'clock I'll be signing the book at the Thames and Hudson booth. Okay, so I'll show you a few pictures and then we can begin a discussion. So these are pictures from the Theater of Apparition book. It was a project that took about 8-9 years, from about 2004, 5 to 14 or 13. So I'll just show you some of the pictures next. Stare. Next. Then and now. Next. Shadows and strangers. Next. Haunted. Next. Black hole. All my pictures from the very beginning have basically been psychologically, existentially driven. And this is probably a good example of this, because these are really psychological images, archetypal images, dreamlike images. Next. Back of the mind. Next. Amulet. Next. So let me make this comment, because it is a rather important one. Rather important. you see this side. See, that's the face. That's the surface. That's what we all sort of are pervaded with on Facebook, in the news, in the stores, the way we look at ourselves, usually in the mirror. But that's just a little part. That's just a little part of things. See, this is the mind. This is the mind. That's evolved more or less, I guess, 3 billion years. Who knows? That's there. That's the dictator. That's the driver. That makes things happen. That's why we can't get out of the problems. That's why we can't sort of get there as a people, as individuals, as cultures, societies. That's why we keep going to war. That's why there's chaos out there in many ways. Until, and I doubt I'll live to see it. I wouldn't say I doubt. I know I won't live to see it. This side integrates with that side, and that side integrates with that. And there's some sort of organic whole in individuals like yourself pervading the planet. I don't think things are going to change very much. Thank you.
Well, Roger, I think we all need a drink.
Well, it's all vodka.
I had 37 questions for you. I think you have answered probably 30 of them, and you've added about 45 additional questions. But if I could just sort of begin at the beginning, but kind of, in my opinion, sort of go at the heart of much of what you've said, but I think what has informed you and what drives you and really what is behind the work. At Berkeley, you studied psychology. Then you went and graduated and went out into the world. You photographed for 5 years, and then you pursued a PhD in geology. I sort of feel this combination of psychology and geology, and you see it in some of the work where you are drilling down into the brain, into the mind, but you're still, and even when we had that conversation in preparation for this, you talked about digging, and trying to find trying to uncover your work. I wonder if you could sort of expand on that, and then I'm going to go a little bit more chronologically into some of the history of your work and ask you a few questions about some of your inspirations. But first, I think this combination of psychology in school in Berkeley, which I think is very important at that time, and also geology, and really for 3 decades you made a career. I mean, that really supported your photography.
That's absolutely correct. Yeah, I mean, see, you know, every field's an art, every field's a science. Fundamentally, if you study psychology in Berkeley, even in those days, and even those heydays of the counterculture, which was a very unique period in 20th century. It was, in some ways, the most revolutionary period of the 20th century, and it had its impact even today in some way or another. So I was right in the middle of that in Berkeley. So I think I developed sort of a cynicism towards mass culture. This exists to this point, and I don't think it's going away. It may be even getting worse. Anyway, there's no pills for it. So this is one thing. You know, at Berkeley, even in those days, there was a lot of upset with the way psychology was being taught because people saw it as a humanistic profession, and the university was teaching it in a very scientific way. And it's the same thing with geology. Geology is mostly a science. It's about chemistry. It's about physics. it's all about all those things, but it can also be very metaphoric. It's about the planet. It's about the evolution of the planet. It's about how things happened, mostly 99.9999% before the humanity got on the planet. So there's a lot there to contemplate. And there's a lot to contemplate about what's going on here right now. A lot. And so if you take the metaphors from both fields, because that's what you have to do. You have to go back to the metaphors, because as sciences, they're totally different. Totally different. But it's the metaphors that you're looking at. And you mentioned, digging deeper, like breaking the surface. I'm breaking the surface of my mind into the deeper levels. And when you're involved in geology, you're trying to peer below the surface to find the ore body, the core. So in a way, I could mention many, many other metaphors between psychology and geology, which are there. And I guess in the end of the day, the two inspirations for my work has been nature, which is geology, and the mystery of my own mind. That's been the inspiration, nothing else really. And my own photographs.
You've also at times mentioned that photography was a hobby, but you were always a photographer. You were always pursuing photography. Your mother worked at Magnum, which I worked at Magnum too. I saw Mark Powers here from Magnum. Interesting that who came over for dinner was Cartier-Bresson, Cortez, Elliot Erwitt. You even mentioned Decisive Moment. How were those early days kind of informing you as a photographer, even though initially it was sort of a hobby?
It was really a hobby for my first 50 years of my life, and when I did it was in the countryside in Outland. It was still a hobby. I hardly had any exhibitions. I was living on the bottom of the planet in a place with a lot of political problems. So it was a hobby. But see, it began as a passion in my teenage years. My mother was so obsessed by it, and she gave me the disease, if you want to call it that. So I caught it and never got rid of it. There's no cure for it. The only cure is to take more pictures, and I'm a little more calmer about it. So this is what happened, and so I never took any courses in photography. It's a self-taught endeavor for me, and it's been one layer and one step after the next step after the next step, and it's like writing my diary. I would just say, what are your pictures about? It's my diary. That's what it was, and the inspiration and the foundation came from the early days of my mother's influence with the people around her and the books and the pictures on the wall, and so I had a great foundation. And sometimes the younger you are, the more impact the foundation has. There's not that many things have that much impact on me at this age, but at that age, when there were things that happened, they had a great impact on my development.
Well, your first book, Boyhood, that was really, I think, coming right out of that traditional photojournalist, go out into the world, understand the world, try to have a conversation with the world, and come back and offer this back. I think Dropes and Plotland too, this is where you now get recognized. You have said you are not a political photographer, but this work was seen in a political context.
Definitely.
And it's still in a photojournalistic approach. And then you have Outland, and that's really this huge shift. And you touched on it, but I wonder, maybe just for me, if you could kind of explain a little bit about this shift in your practice.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. In geology, you go back to the metaphor. It's like when the layers are like this, and all of a sudden something happens, and they're like this. So you jump to another level, and it happened sort of quickly. I guess it started to happen with the fact that I started to interact with the subject. I felt a little more confident. I felt creative. I became like a theater director, which is in a way what I am now. But it's sort of, I sort of directed the people, and the people came up with ideas, I came up with ideas, and you know, we made this so-called theater of the absurd, and you know, it started to take me to another zone. See, this is what happens. You know, you can think all you want about this idea or that idea, but the key is implementation. And it happened very spontaneously. You know, I was isolated in South Africa. I didn't go to many museums. There wasn't much happening. So all these things that really happened in my career came about through my taking of pictures. And so this happened in certain cases in 96, 97, that there was this fault, this jump. These pictures took me into other zones, and I got a thrill, I guess, or somehow or another felt that it was taking me to some place that I felt I wanted to follow in that road, and then I started to build on it. But I do remember, and this was sort of the symbol of it, of the whole thing, when you used to go in South Africa in those days, you had to fill out a blue form, even if you were a resident citizen or whatever, a customs form, and they said, what's your profession? So for many years, because I worked all over Africa in geology, I would just put businessman. You never put photographer, never. That's like, anyway. So I started occasionally put photographer when I went just into South Africa because I was a resident there. I remember in 97, very clearly one day, there was photographer, then I put / artist. It was in 97. And you can see in that work, at about 97, there's a shift in that Outland Pictures. The link with Plotterland, the previous project, breaks, and then it goes into another zone about that time.
Mm-hmm. But I always think that's interesting because now you start injecting yourself into the pictures or your mind or what you see in your mind. And actually going back to the mind, you mentioned just now that these are an exploration in Roger Ballen, and this is what you're responding to, and that's what some of the imagery that you are making. But we are also responding to it too. We're up on the stage because people are buying your books and going to your exhibitions. So it does have a broader impact than just inside your mind, and I wonder if you think about that, even though you're kind of making pictures for yourself.
Look, again, Roger Ballen speaking, the worst thing you can ever do as an artist is make pictures for other people. Then you're just out trying to outguess the market. You might as well work for the stock exchange. So, you know, look, it's been very, very gratifying that people relate to my pictures. It'd be very depressing if I was just talking to the wall here. So it's very gratifying that people react to the pictures, and a lot of people say, oh, Mr. Ballen, these pictures make me anxious. They're disturbing me, and I hate to say it. You may find this a little bit offensive, what I say, but I usually say, well, I'm very pleased to hear this.
I'm not surprised you said that. So I'm going to turn it to the audience for questions, but I'll ask one question. There's a microphone here, so if you have a question, please raise your hand. But my question to you about is this process of, you know, on average it's 5 years, these projects. And what is the process that you go through for potentially this next project? I feel like your work has been constantly evolving, and I'm sort of excited for what you are thinking about in your next project.
Well, look,
and I'll make a plug for you. The Thames and Hudson retrospective book is coming out this fall, so we can see everything you've done up until now, but I'm also thinking about your next project.
No, but the next project is in the last few pages of the Thames and Hudson book, and it's about rats.
I live in New York, that's good.
See, rats are a complicated animal too, you know. They have their own cultural metaphors and archetypal metaphors, and they're also just a part of nature. So the rats aren't, in my pictures, the rats aren't necessarily bad guys, and they're not necessarily good guys. They're just part of the universe. They're part of the absurdity.
But our reaction to rats, I won't say globally because everyone has different.
But they eat them in Africa.
Yes, but most people recoil with rats.
You're absolutely right.
So you're already starting off agitating us with that animal.
You're absolutely right. And the birds were just the opposite. So in a way, the birds were a symbol of the heaven, the purity, the link between heaven and the earth. So in a way, to complete the circle, I had to deal with the rats.
I know that you mentioned using animals. You were a little tired of people focusing on people and asking about the person and who is this person, why did you so you started using animals. Can you expand on that a little bit? And
this is a very good point, a very, very good point. You know, people normally ask me the same question: what do the people think? Do they like the pictures? Did you exploit them? Do you give them the photographs? Same questions over and over again. And I did what I did with the people. You know, it evolved. I did what I had to do, and I moved on. Life moves on. That's part of being an artist. You know, I'm not the same person I was 20 years ago, even though there's aspects that are. So you have to keep dealing with your own life and trying to make different comments about who you are and inside and outside of you. And so I moved on from portraiture, and first I don't know if it really had that much to do with the endless issues that came up with the subjects. You know, I commonly say in the 90s, I had one friend in the country and wasn't a human being. It was a dog called Leroy. So I wasn't so popular. So, but animals, like, you know, animals to me are tremendous. I love working with them, and you know, it's interesting and challenging, and I think also, you know, when I talk about that the pictures are psychological, but the animal also, within the confines of the world we're living in, are a great metaphor for what's happening in the environment and in the ecology and on the planet. So if you look at the asylum of the birds, you know, those birds are in a bad place. Look at the video, you'll see they're in a bad place. And put two and two together, and maybe you can figure out what that metaphor is about.
I don't know if there's questions from the audience. Oh, there is a question from the audience.
Hello. I was wondering if you could speak a bit about the relationship between your work and French absurdist theatre, specifically Artaud and Beckett.
Sorry, I didn't hear so well.
I was wondering about how French absurdist theatre fed into your work and how you came to incorporate elements of kind of Artaud and Beckett into your own output.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, this is a good point. You know, in 1972, I did my first film, and it was copied after a Beckett play. And I was very interested in theater in the early 70s, Beckett, UNESCO, other people, Pirandello. You know, these things enter your mind in some way or another. They're transformed, and it's so difficult to know what really is responsible for what you do. I really can't get to the bottom of anything, to tell you the truth. You know, I can talk about my mother, I can talk about Beckett, I can talk about South Africa. But when I get to the place, I'm basically looking at a blank wall for 5 years in a row. I don't know, I have no plans when I get to a place. I always say that when I get there, I get there with a silent mind, and I leave with a silent mind. I keep a calm mind, and when I get there, I try to make coherency with the camera. And so, what influences lead to that picture? I can't get to the bottom of it.
Can I ask you, because do you know when you're at the end of a project? I've asked a few photographers this, and one of my favorite stories is a photographer said, I had no idea I was at the end. In fact, I'd still be shooting if my other friend said, you have to stop, you have to make a stop point.
You know, we all work a lot with intuition. It's like when you're at a buffet. You know, I guess you could eat and get sick.
Okay, I saw another question. Question?
Me? Yeah. Hi, Roger. I'm curious to know, do you photograph as seen as found? Like, especially in the boarding house pictures, the picture of the woman in the bed with the child underneath and then the painting above. Is that a composition that you put together, or is it as you've seen it, as you found it? Is there interference?
No, everything, these pictures aren't like 1, 2, 3 points. They're like, it's like a painting, I normally say. If you look at a painting as thousands of brushstrokes, there are thousands of steps that get there. And some may be very spontaneous, some may be deliberate, some may have to do with what the subject did, some may be with how I transformed and saw that and took it to the next step. It's an interactive process, totally interactive. I have a 6x6 Rolleiflex camera, you know, it's not street photography, so, you know, you're working with the place, with the people, and there's some things that happen when somebody, you know, when the eye blinks, it's a spontaneous moment. And that may be, like with that dog, may be the crucial part of that photograph. And everything else may be put there by 10 different people, but the dog's eye is the spontaneous thing that helps put the picture together. So it's an interactive concept. It's interactive.
But do you ever come up with a vision of how you see the composition, or do you interact with it in that way and you might put a picture into the picture? Or is
it's totally intuitive. It's 50 years of doing this, plus intuition, plus imagination. It's how the mind interacts in that place in different ways, and the process is actually unfathomable. It really is. It's multiple layered thinking, and I don't really have a clue how it happens, to tell you the truth. I don't think anybody really does.
So another question, otherwise I'm going, oh, there's a question back there. I think there's a...
Hello. I was wondering if you could tell us a bit more about the introduction of the drawn element and mark making, because mark making and drawing has so much to do with thinking, and the introduction of those backdrops in your pictures gives a sense of a layering and a framing and adding windows into the mind. So I'm just wondering if you can say a bit more about that.
Yeah, the painting, as I said, the issue of the painting was an interesting point because, look, we had to keep the lecture short, but during some of the periods, even in Platelan in the 80s, I went into people's houses, and in some of the houses, there was an act of so-called social insanity. The children or the people living in the house were like drawing all over the walls. Like, and this, to me, this was an act of creativity. This was amazing. And a normal, so-called normal person will walk into the house and say, this is insanity. There's something wrong with the person. Just like I remember when I was in Colorado, I refused to cut the front lawn, and they gave me a summons. So, anyway, the thing is, so the drawing actually came from reality. It came from reality. And it came from the places that I was visiting and working in, and there were drawings on the walls. And I would, in some cases, set the subject up against the drawings. And so this was the beginning of the drawing, and so it evolved over long periods, and then it started to occur in greater frequency and started to take over a lot of the aesthetics of the picture and create a layer in the picture that I think, well, it's part of what I said in the beginning, it's part of my aesthetic, a so-called Ballen-esque aesthetic, is where the drawing interacts with the subject, with the place, the physical place, with the objects, with the animals, to create a very complex reality that is very difficult to explain. If I could explain the reality, then I would stop taking pictures.
I have a question about, I'm coming from the International Center for Photography. We have a tremendous archive, and the value of an archive, its historical importance, I find so relevant today. You keep on going to the past to look at what's happening today, and you find many answers. So recently, you have started the Roger Ballen Foundation for at the Center of Photography in Cape Town. Could you just tell us a little bit about that? Because I thought it's just such a great, put a stake in the ground to begin to really create a center in South Africa about photography.
Well, thank you for bringing this up. So very pleased to have the opportunity to be a part of it. In South Africa, they've actually finished the museum there. It's called the Museum of Contemporary Art Africa. It's in the so-called waterfront in Cape Town. It's by far the biggest contemporary art museum in Africa, and it opens in September. And you know, it'll be focusing on different forms of art in Africa, contemporary art forms. And I've had a foundation, I guess, for 15 years, and we brought people to South Africa. We organized catalogs, did all sorts of other things that foundations do. And you know, I felt this was a good thing. I thought it had some benefits to people, but you know, like I'm one person, you know, and I'm busy and I'm getting older and whatever. So I felt that really I was very fortunate that this museum was being built, and they were very enthusiastic about combining what I'd done in my foundation with the goals of the museum. So, you know, we talked for some time, and we were able to formulate how the center would work in the museum. So the center is the I guess the pinnacle of the photography in the museum. The center is the basis of how the photography department will work there. And the basic purpose is to promote, exhibit, educate people about photography that's happening in Africa.
It's terrific. I have a final question, and then I'll see if there's one more question. But my question is sort of generic, but it is, there's a lot of young people, and they're trying to start their career. What is your advice to people wanting to pursue this? What do you normally say to people trying to start this as a career?
Well, I've sort of can divide it into 2 points. One, the personal, which is, you know, if you want to make a career out of this, you have to passion for what you're doing. You have to educate yourself. You have to be disciplined about what you're doing, focus and do the work, and be prepared for the sacrifice, because it's a very, very, very difficult field as an art photographer. I can hardly think of a more difficult field to be involved in. You're competing against billions of photographs every day, and every day it gets worse. So my only suggestion, and it worked for me, but I'm not saying what works for me doesn't necessarily work for somebody else. It's just a point. If you want to do this in the long term, you really need another career.
How's the geology business?
Geology is a nice job. What are they? It's a very nice job.
Oh, there's one last question.
Hi. I just wanted to ask, I found some of the imagery quite troubling, and you know, you've been dogged by controversy and, you know, talking about exploiting people and such like. So I don't want to just bang on about the same questions. But I do have a question that, for instance, in the video, sometimes it's sort of bordered on a sort of freak show feel or a sort of cabinet of curiosities. And I just wonder, and you don't want to talk about the politics or the economics of this world that you're photographing, and I accept that, but does that mean that we're really just seeing a sort of window into your mind? Are we supposed to accept it just as that?
I hate to tell you something. It's got deeply in your mind. It's troubling you, so yeah, you need to think about why it's troubling you and why there's a conflict going on. And so that's part of what makes the work. It makes you think about those things in one part of the mind, and this is maybe a good way to end the talk today. And I'm not trying to escape the question. I'm trying to make it more philosophical.
We have a couch behind this, and Dr. Ballen will talk to you about your dreams and what's...
Well, you know, this is... but I only have half an hour because I have a book signing.
Yeah, yeah.
But,
No,
well, maybe if I get lunch, I'll stay here. But anyway, but what I would You know, so what I was trying to say, and this is quite an important way to end this conversation. Yeah, politics, politicals are it's like every other word. Words are just very obscure. The more you think about words, you see how obscure they are. You know, everybody asks me, oh, Roger, how are you this morning? I always say fine, but I'm not fine. Or I might be fine. I don't even know what fine is anymore. So we use these words all the time that we don't know what we're talking about half the time. So what I tried to say at the end, if we talk about politics, and I remember at Berkeley, there was R.D. Laing. It was called The Politics of the Self, the Divided Self, the Politics of the Mind. He was very much into these ideas. And what he said, and this really stuck in my mind, you know, the key thing in terms of being an artist like myself in terms of politics, the key thing is to get one part of the mind to speak to the other part of the mind, to speak to the other part of the mind. So to answer your question without evading the question, this brought up some issues for you. And you have to decide, you've got to let one place in your mind talk to the other part of the mind to figure out what's disturbing you and why it's disturbing you. And you may blame it all on me, you may blame it on yourself, or you may blame it on the people around you. It's up to you.
Well, Roger, thank you so much for this talk. Thank you all for coming, and enjoy the rest of the show. Thank you.
Thank you very much.